Hey everyone, this is Jonah Johnson with you for another edition of JJ in the Field.
Hey guys, Jonah Johnson, Sales Agronomist with PCT Sunrise, and today we are here in Allglades County and we're looking at some corn. So this is the exciting time. This is kind of piggybacking on my video I did a couple weeks ago about, guys are interested in what their yield's going to look like. So we're going out and doing kernel counts, and there's different ways to do that. And you can look on the internet and find, we can weigh ears, we can do kernel counts long, length by the amount of ears you have out in the field, and that's a pretty common amount. The other thing that's interesting this time of year as we're getting closer, we're in the dent stage in a lot of parts of Ohio, minus some of the most northern parts of Ohio. But as we look at grain quality and kernel quality is all very indicative of the end-use product, number one, but it's also very important in regards to what that final factor of yield is going to equate to, because, we're always very interested in yield, which is a mass over an area, right? Then we're talking about test weight, and test weight is more or less a computation of how many kernels can we pack really tightly in those test weight cups to see what our test weight is. But test weight is very indicative of grain kernel weights. And so what do I mean by that? So if we look at my pictorial here, when we start to look at our corn kernels, we're very interested in how those kernels look for several reasons. Number one, in my example here, that when we look at starch accumulation, dry matter that's stored from those plants. So we're very interested in building that bank. And I've been using that term a lot this year. How can we make those stalks, those leaves, plant health, increase all that? Because as we're in this time of year, all that right now is being retranslocated into these kernels. So we set the pericarp. The pericarp is the skeleton of those kernels. And when that gets set, that's the size of it. That's the physical footprint. But now we're interested in filling these guys. And what's interesting right now in this time of the season, one thing simple we can tell about how do we know we're going to have good kernel weights, hence test weight, which equates to yield over an area, is looking at the dents in our kernels on our ears. And so a real simplistic view of that is that in some hybrids, they're physiologically just have different kernels. They may have shallow dents. They may have really deep dents. So anytime you look at the morphology of a kernel, if I have a hybrid that has a very deep dent, that means it had very light kernel weights, and you're going to have lighter, fluffier kernels, and it's not going to be very dense. And so usually, because if you use my hand as kind of like a fuel gauge to that kernel, if they don't fill up and push this out, that means it's going to be light and fluffy. Then we can have, which is a lot of times we have on the corn dents, and all of our field corn we grow in Ohio, in all fairness, is yellow dent corn. So it's going to dent in some regards. But anytime we can have these kernels not draw in and create a deep dent, if you have a lot of kernels, it's actually bubbling out and pushing that out, that means we have exceptionally high kernel weights because it's packed so much energy. And one thing that I get pretty stoked about is if you think about our weather now, it's cooled down, our evenings are going down in the 50s and 60s, and our corn's still filling. That's perfect temperatures to fill those kernels, because it's like if you ran a marathon. If I ran a marathon all day long and I didn't go to sleep at night and I kept running, any energy you consume during the day is going to be consumed by your muscles and excreted through your body. Same thing in our corn plants. If they can't slow down temperature low, if we had temperatures in the 80s at night, all that energy it created through the leaves, through the photosynthate, through the plant, is going to be burned just for that plant to stay alive. So if we cool our temperatures down and all this photosynthate goes right in this ear, we're going to have really good kernel weights. And that's where we get that fudge factor of that 90, 85, 90,000. Maybe we go lower for big kernels, maybe we go higher for, God forbid, small kernels. But that's one way to look if you know how your kernel weights are going to equate to better test weights in our corn. Another interesting observation, if you look at your ears of your corn, is grain quality. So in this example here, note that the yellow color, that dark yellow cheddar cheese color, that's very indicative of high grain quality. Now if I show another hybrid where you can just see straight differences in color, this one has lighter, fluffier grain, bigger kernels nevertheless, but we have much denser kernels based on looking at the dents. Look at all the kernels bubbled out. Look at the deep dents. Now in all fairness, this could be the hybrid, just hybrid difference, but there is differences just in the expression of those kernels. And a great example of this is, so like Tostitos in southern Indiana, if you were a grower and you sent them low quality grain quality into their plant to make chips, an example of that is low test weight corn, you're going to have a lot more broken chips. When they make their chips and they bake them or fry them, you have better grain quality, you're going to have much better chip quality. And that's just an example where grain quality really matters. As you're doing those yield checks and scouting your fields, it's really easy to go out and look at your corn and get a handle on how's my grain quality based on the year we've had. How's that kernel look? Because that's going to be really indicative of how you can expect how your corn is going to yield at the end of the season. So if you have further questions, follow up with your local ASA or anybody on our PCT team. And this is Jonah Johnson for PCT Sunrise. Thanks for watching.